Okay, so there are basically three parts to working with shame. The first is mindfulness. You know, we can't, if we're not suffering, we can't evoke compassion, but we also, um, we really can't work with something if we don't know what it is. So we need mindfulness. We need awareness of what we're experiencing while we're experiencing it with acceptance. And then we need to respond to shame with kindness and compassion. And this can be done, by the way, either by your presence. If you see one of your students struggling with shame, you don't have to say this is shame. You can just be compassionate. If somebody wants to learn how to be compassionate with themselves, you can also teach them. Ideally, both, you know. The best way to teach self-compassion is to be compassionate and also to model self-compassion. There's even research that shows that if we are self-compassionate with ourselves, other people can see that and they become more self-compassionate with themselves. And the third part is working with backdraft. And I don't think we talked about backdraft last time, did we, Sean? Yeah. So this is really important for mindfulness teachers, for therapists, anybody who's working in the field of self-compassion and compassion needs to know about backdraft. But basically what it means is backdraft is the distress that arises when we give ourselves compassion. So there's a saying that love reveals everything unlike itself. Or when we give ourselves unconditional love, we discover the conditions under which we were not loved. So backdraft is a firefighter term, you know. When a firefighter opens a door, if there's fire behind it, the oxygen goes in and the fire comes out. That's backdraft. Similar with us, you know, when we open the door of our hearts with mindfulness, which is loving awareness, or we open the door of our hearts with self-compassion, the love runs in and the pain comes out. And when it comes out, sometimes people go, whoa, you know, it feels like kaboom. Actually, what we like to say is it's kabloom. And I'll say more about that in a moment. But backdraft is, well, I'll say more about that now. Yeah, so backdraft is actually part of the transformation process. When we give ourselves kindness, it stirs things up inside. And then when we become conscious of it and then meet that suffering with kindness and compassion, it actually transforms. And this is how people with mindfulness and self-compassion can reparent themselves. Even really old childhood experiences, we can reparent. We can heal those wounds with the resources of mindfulness and compassion. But so what we like to say is sometimes it feels like kaboom, but it's actually kabloom, right? And so backdraft can be experienced in many ways. It could be either mentally, like I'm all alone, I'm a failure, I'm unlovable. It could be emotionally, like shame, fear, grief. It could be physically, maybe you have body memories or aches and pains. Or it could be behavioral, you know, like a fight, flight, freeze response. So if you ever notice if your students notice or you notice in your students that suddenly they're swept up with like these core negative beliefs, like I'm such a failure, you know, like they're struggling with mindfulness meditation and they think I'm a failure. Where does that come from, right? Are they a failure? No, but they're superimposing this idea. And so what do we do with this when it happens? So what you need to know, first of all, that backdraft is not a problem, right? Backdraft is part of the healing process. Resistance to backdraft is a problem. When we fight it, in other words, if I have the idea I'm unlovable, and then I go crazy around this, then, in other words, resistance to backdraft could look like muscle tension, isolating myself, over-intellectualizing, getting agitated, withdrawing, I mentioned that, self-criticism. When I start doing this kind of stuff, it means I'm fighting what's coming up. So what we need to know, what we need to do is to be able to hold, not only the experience that's coming up, like say grief, sadness, but also the way we fight it. To understand this is all part of the process. We want to hold the backdraft. We want to hold the resistance to the backdraft.